there's a tree that held the desert's oldest secret. For 4,000 years, its golden pods fed civilizations where nothing else could survive. Then, in less than a century, it was nearly erased, called a weed, burned, cleared from the land. But beneath the soil, something was waiting. This is the story of Mesquite, the tree that sweetened life before sugar existed, and may hold the answer to what comes after. Welcome to Nature Lost Vault. The archive opens in the Sonoran Desert. Tucson, Arizona. Clay jars buried 4,000 years ago. Inside, mesquite seeds perfectly preserved. Archaeologists found them in 1998, still viable after 4,000 years. The people who stored them had no written language, but they understood something we forgot. In a land where corn withered and rivers turned to dust, mesquite still gave fruit. It was a fortress of life. The tree's roots reached over 100 feet deep, deeper than any well, deeper than drought. Scientists later discovered those roots could store up to 600 gallons of water, enough to survive 10 summers. And the fruit it produced was a miracle of engineering. Each pod contained 35% natural sugar, complete protein, and soluble fiber. The air around a flowering grove carried the scent of caramel and smoke. When ground into flour, it lasted months without spoiling. The Tohono O'odham called it our sugar. The Pima, the Yaqui, the Seri all knew its value. For thousands of years, families gathered the pods as they fell like rain, crushing each one into soft flour that fed entire villages. When Spanish explorers arrived in 1535, they wrote of it with wonder. Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca described pods that tasted of honey itself. He watched families grind them into meal, baking it into cakes that fed them through winter. They called it the Tree of Life. By 1541, another explorer recorded forests stretching across the Rio Grande, canopies so dense they created their own shade ecosystem. Entire villages lived beneath their branches. The tree gave without asking for anything. But then the story took a darker turn. By the late 1800s, the land changed hands. Ranchers moved in with cattle, cotton, and conquest. To them, mesquite was not the tree of life. It was just a weed, something in the way of profit. Colonists brought sugarcane from distant islands. They built mills, plantations, systems of control. Mesquite, which grew freely without irrigation or ownership, had no place in that system. Millions of acres were cleared, trees cut to the ground. But mesquite does not surrender easily. Even when the trunk was severed, the roots remained silent, patient, waiting underground. They burned it to plant cotton. They poisoned it for wheat. But the roots went deeper than anyone guessed. Cut to the ground, mesquite returned, 10 new shoots for every trunk removed. The United States Department of Agriculture, after decades of trying to destroy it, finally admitted in 1948 that mesquite cannot be eradicated. But beneath the surface, another story was unfolding. The tree was not just surviving, it was healing the land. By the early 1900s, ranchers believed they had won. Millions of cattle roamed where mesquite once stood. They had turned wilderness into wealth, or so they thought. Within 20 years, the soil cracked like pottery. Rivers dried. The ground, stripped of its cover, blew away in the wind. Cattle began to starve. And the tree they had cleared, the tree people called a pest, started creeping back. Ranchers called it the invader. But it had been there long before any fence or railroad. Then scientists noticed something unexpected. Where mesquite returned, the soil changed. Its deep roots pulled nitrogen from the air, a feat few plants can manage, feeding it back into the dead ground. Beneath its shade, which cooled the soil, grass began to grow again. Wildlife returned. The desert started breathing. By the 1970s, ecologists gave it a new name: keystone species, the silent engineer of the desert ecosystem. Its pods became food for deer, javelina, and coyote. Its flowers fed native bees. Its wood became shelter. What the world had called a weed had been quietly healing the land the entire time. So the question grew louder. If a tree could survive every drought in recorded history and restore the ground beneath it, why did people ever turn away from it? By the 1990s, the land began asking for it back. Droughts deepened across the American Southwest. Farmers searched for crops that could live on almost no water. That is when scientists looked again at the tree they had ignored for a century. In 1993, the USDA launched desert crop studies. The results were startling. The flower held 3 times more calcium than milk and as much protein as eggs. All from a tree that never needed irrigation or fertilizer. At the same time, a strange hunger emerged. People had more sugar than ever before, yet more illness too. Global sugar consumption crossed 170 million tons a year. Diabetes cases tripled within 2 decades. Doctors searched for natural sugars that could feed energy without harm. Then researchers turned back to the desert. In 2005, a team at the University of Arizona found its sweetness came from fructooligosaccharides, plant sugars that feed good gut bacteria instead of raising blood sugar. Mesquite pods had a low glycemic index, safe for people managing diabetes. A teaspoon of mesquite flour could sweeten coffee without a single crash in energy. It tasted earthy, caramel and smoke, something nature built for balance. One scientist wrote, "It's the sugar that heals instead of harms." By 2010, health stores across the United States started selling mesquite sweetener, calling it the sugar of the future. Prices jumped to $20 a pound, turning an ancient food into a new luxury. Chefs in Tucson and Santa Fe began baking mesquite bread and even making mesquite ice cream. The same fruit once banned by empire now sat on supermarket shelves beside maple syrup and honey. But the real rediscovery didn't come from labs or chefs alone. It came from memory. Around 2012, a quiet movement began in the deserts of Sonora and Arizona. A few indigenous farmers, elders, and food historians wanted to bring mesquite back from memory to life. They called it reclaiming the forgotten tree. Many still had old seeds passed down in jars, hidden for safety through generations. A Tohono O'odham farmer named Maria Lopez started planting them again in 2013 using her grandmother's method, burying seeds next to dry washes where water once flowed. Within 2 years, her trees were covered in pods. She said the smell reminded her of childhood mornings, when families roasted the pods for breakfast. What began as a small act of memory turned into a movement. By 2018, community seed banks in Tucson and Hermosillo began collecting mesquite varieties from across the Southwest. Some had pods red like clay, others pale gold. Botanists identified over 30 native species, each adapted to its own corner of the desert. The world was remembering what indigenous people had known for centuries. True sweetness does not come from a factory. It grows quietly in the heat. By 2020, the conversation around food shifted again. Global droughts were breaking records. In parts of California, farmland cracked. Wheat yields dropped by 40%. Rivers that once fed whole cities turned to dust. Scientists started asking one simple question: what survives when everything else fails? The answer pointed back to the mesquite tree. NASA researchers studying sustainable crops noted how its deep roots could reach up to 200 feet underground, tapping water no other plant could touch. One scientist said, "It is less a tree, more a lesson in endurance." Governments began taking notice. In 2021, Mexico's National Forestry Commission launched programs to replant mesquite across 300,000 hectares of degraded land. And because the Prosopis genus, the mesquite family, grows in arid lands across the globe, farmers in Argentina, India, and Kenya joined in. The Food and Agriculture Organization called it a forgotten crop of survival. The tree that once stood as a symbol of resistance now stands as a blueprint for the future. Every pod, every branch, every root carries a reminder. The answers to tomorrow's hunger may already be growing in the soil beneath our feet. This knowledge is not lost. It is waiting for us to remember. If this vault opened something for you and you find value in these stories, hit subscribe and the bell icon. Every like and every share helps preserve this forgotten wisdom together. The next vault opens soon.